Hey everyone, Anthony here, and oops, should put that window in front. All right, cool. You'll see there's no copy of Nuke on screen. It's because we're barely going to use it today, and it's because I wanted to take you briefly through the init and menu.py files, which I suspect you all know about, but also just take you through and dig into a little bit of the guts of Nuke. So it's not going to be anything super novel that you won't have already seen, but just pointing at stuff that you may not realize you can hack into if you wanted. Probably don't do this at a facility, or maybe just be aware that there's probably a bunch of access controls to stop you, but still useful to know. So the first thing, we're just going to quickly recap. First thing is, if you're looking for documentation, I actually kind of like some of these digging around in the support area, but you also might want to go and get this information, the Python developer guide. Right. So this will tell you about the startup scripts, the evaluation order, and all the details. We're basically going to go through it in a very abbreviated fashion. So you should read through this if you're curious to learn more. And also, just for good form, if you want to know how to get there, and sometimes your Google searches don't go so well, just follow this pathway. You want to go learn something about Nuke. So over here, Foundry site, documentation for Nuke. It's under the developer guide, and it's the developer guide here. You can, I believe you can download copies of this. Pretty sure you can download copies of this so you can stash it on your local machine. I've got it somewhere floating about. Anyway, that's how you get to the documentation. So anyway, what are the init and menu.py files? They are basically files that are run on all runs of Nuke, and for menu.py when you run the graphical interface, the GUI, right? So the most common place you'll see them, or the first place everyone probably plays with them, is in your home directory. So scroll down quickly. So since I'm on Windows, I'll demonstrate that. It's in this area. See users username.nuke. Now, technically speaking, this isn't correct. It's actually in your home directories.nuke. Now, it's a very subtle thing, so it's not really relevant, but bring that up quickly here. So when I say home directory, Unix people, you don't have to worry about this. HOMEPATH is the variable on Windows, so it's the HOMEPATH.nuke area. Right. The reason I'm being slightly pedantic is some of you actually might have weird setups where home path is set to something that is not that specific path. You can set it if you want. Probably don't. It's confusing to everybody, but gets you here. Right. So anyway, I've already made init.py and menu.py. Literally, I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code here. I'll bring them in. Chuck them in here, and they just say init and menu.py go here. Not particularly exciting. So when you run Nuke, if you run it in terminal mode, or even if you run it with TG, so if you're not aware of TG runs it in terminal mode, but provides a Qt interface so you can still pop up dialogues. It's most likely you'll never encounter it, but just so you know, only reason I mention it is because we're in terminal mode. Is because when we say GUI, we mean the full Nuke interactive GUI, not a Qt bit of it. It's the full Nuke interactive GUI, right? So right now we're just running Nuke in command line mode. I should only expect it to run init.py and not menu.py. It should come out like that pretty soon. So yeah, also try not to do any damage in init.py because it'll blow up everything that every Nuke run, including Nuke headless runs on the farm, and you'll be able to take down a whole bunch of your render processes. Not that I've ever done that by accident. Not that I've ever done that on purpose. Yeah. If we run Nuke with the GUI mode, you'll see it come up. We'll see init.py run first, and then menu.py run. So menu.py, in this case, I'd have things like clearing out viewers from scripts I've loaded up. Nope. And there we go. So now we're in Nuke, and the documentation as well, let's pull it outside quickly here, says that it's going to look through these areas, and it says that Nuke starts searches in the plugin path, right? There are ways to modify it, but for now, we just want to look what that Nuke plugin path is. So we just run this Nuke plugin path. It's going to print it out one per line, so it's nice and pretty. You can see it's my home directory, this common plugin directory, a bunch of other ones. But you'll also notice this. That's where Nuke's installed to. In fact, all of this is where Nuke's installed to. So it implies that Nuke is actually getting into this directory. And that's actually the reason I started poking in the first place. Well, sorry. That's actually the reason I was able to solve something in the first place. So where are we here? So in my previous video, there was this comment here about why Nuke knob default type scanline render motion vectors type wasn't working for a knob default. Like I couldn't figure it out initially. And I just went, wait, what? So I checked a number of things and just went, I'm going insane, checked the knob name, I'm really going nuts. And then suddenly I remembered that Nuke does its own fancy setup, and the default of that knob is not what it's being set to. So there's something else coming into the system that is mucking around with it, which is where I started playing around. And this is how we get here. So I just happened to remember that this directory contains interesting stuff. So I started having a look around. Where's my Explorer window? So here you will, let's just change the view to list. All right, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Okay, and there are things that might start looking familiar. They might actually start looking just like commands you've run, like base name or a card object, card 3D. So the card 3D is compiled binary, so we can't touch that one. But you know, somewhere here, there is, if we just scroll far enough, an init.py file. And since we know that this file is run on every startup, started going, hang about, I know what's going on. So let's drag that away. Let's minimize that one. Let's have a look at this init.py in Visual Studio Code. You can see that it is, you can see it's just a normal Python file. It's got a bunch of stuff in it, and it's importing a knob defaults. So have a poke through and just see what's happening. You can see it's adding paths for plugins. It's doing some stuff for knob defaults. It's adding sequence file extensions. So these are commands that you can run yourself, and you probably will run yourself if you're doing some other things that are like if you have a custom file format or something potentially, or a custom file extension. But the one I was interested in is the knob defaults. So obviously there's also a knob defaults file out here. Knobdefaults.py, and here we are. So it sets all these knob defaults. So those commands you're executing, those Python setup files you're building, they probably are going to do some of the same stuff. So in this case, the scanline render was a problem, and I was like, this makes no sense. So I did a bit of snooping, and this comment is me already changing it to, this is what the file looks like normally. So the scanline render has two knob defaults set, and this is at Nuke initialization time. One is for the output motion vectors type, and the other one is for conservative sampler shading. I don't care about the second one, but I noticed that it's called output motion vectors type, which is a different thing than what we saw in, bring that up, scanline render. So, shader. So motion vectors type, it's a different knob name. So it's probable, and this is me completely speculating, that somewhere the scanline render, let's actually see if we can find it quickly. You can go S for scan. So here we are. The scanline render binary here, this defines the scanline render node. Inside of it, it must have a knob. Again, speculating, must have a knob which has got a name of output motion vectors type, right? And somewhere in the plugin initialization, it goes, all right, cool, I know what the default value of that is, I'm going to set it to that one. But you don't get to see that knob on the exterior of the scanline renderer node. It's got another knob which is called motion vectors type, which does some fancy stuff to read that value. I don't actually know, but that's what I think is happening. So yeah, that's me digging around and poking around and how I could figure some of this stuff out. Now, the whole reason for pointing this out is that For those of you who've been playing around with Nuke, you may never have really felt like you understood this or felt like getting into it, but there's a whole bunch of stuff here that will start to look potentially a little bit familiar. So one thing I'll demonstrate is, or point out, is let's put a bunch of transforms down here. And what is that? Oh, that's getting a bit too much. On the bottom transform node, we're going to use the topnode call. So topnode, if you haven't used it, is a TCL command that's really handy, topnode. So if I execute the TCL, I get this weird number here. That's just a node identifier, but it's telling me the topmost node in the stack. So top node, and we can ask the value of the top node's name. Mate, give me a name. Your name is scanline renderer 1. You can also pick up things from that node, like we'll just give it a label of that, and you can ask this for the label. And there's the label. So it's a really handy command, but it looks like black magic. You won't find topnode in a TCL reference because, well, it doesn't exist in TCL. It exists only in Nuke's implementation. And why does it only exist in Nuke's implementation? Because topnode just happens to be that. So yeah, it's a TCL procedure that is defined here, and when you run topnode, this is what you're doing. So there's a lot of stuff here that's worth poking around, just if you're curious. So that's topnode. So you could re-implement this in Python as an exercise if you want, or you could maybe don't change the algorithm here, but you know, you could have a poke around. What else is useful to point out? There is some other stuff. What was I going to show you? There was, oh god, that's right, update plugin menu. So you've got this, that's novel. I don't think I did that. Don't know. Yeah, okay, let's not look at that one. That's a bit weird. That's interesting. So that's all of the stuff here, but also you've got, where are we? Nukescripts. So an example of nukescripts is auto backdrop. So that's where auto backdrop is defined. So anytime you see a nukescript, as in literally it says import nukescripts.auto backdrop, which you'll see in some examples, you just go around here and have a look at how it does it. So that's how auto backdrop works. It's not that exciting, but it does it. And then you know how every backdrop you put down has a different color? That's what it's doing. It's got this random tile color. So that's why it changes. It's got no pattern, it's literally random. And if you're wondering how certain things will get into the menu system, well, let's also have a look at, let's go back one level to menu.py. Right, so this is back in the plugins area, menu.py, bring that up. So this is the Nuke menu.py structure, and here is how it's actually doing a bunch of commands. So it's building its menus in the same way you would build the menu if you wanted to build stuff. It's just it's getting the viewer menu, it's adding a command to it, it's adding a divider, and then it's another menu, and then it's all these commands with shortcut keys. So, you know, some of the stuff's actually really interesting to get into and poke around, and it represents sample code that you're actively using day to day. And it's all there in your install directory. So have at it. So yeah, hopefully this was interesting and somewhat useful. Let me know if you want to explore any more of this stuff. I can poke around a bit further and demonstrate a few things if I can, if I can actually get into it. I'm also slavishly making sure I'm using the Nuke non-commercial version so that you can all play around at home in exactly the same way. But otherwise, yeah, let us know how you go with it, or if you found anything interesting like that ARG comment. That was kind of amusing. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.